Then they switch and they govern as progressives or liberals or whatever you want to call them, consistently.
Thanks, Mr. President. Listen, Ira basically took all my time, so what are your questions?
Welcome to January 2017 RMC TV in a brand new year. And if you missed this month's meeting, you're going to get the opportunity to go back and watch it in 3 separate clips. So this month we had Jeff Church from RenoTaxRevolution.com. We had our Assemblyman Ira Hansen and Mark Amadei. And today's clip is going to be about Assemblyman Ira Hansen and his presentation on the issue of schools in Nevada. Next week, we're going to have Mark Amadei's presentation. And finally, we're going to bring on Jeff Church for a Timelines interview. So without further ado, let's get right into this episode with our Republican conservative assembly member, Ira Hansen. Go get him, Ira.
Then they switch and they govern as progressives or liberals or whatever you want to call them, consistently. So the first thing Trump did that made me sweat was, who did he start courting for his Secretary of State? A guy that was viciously attacking him, right? So I thought, oh great, here he's doing what Reagan did. He's reaching out, trying to be the moderate and, you know, heal the party and all that sort of stuff. It was Mitt Romney. He didn't do it. Now, how many of you watched his press conference the other day? I did. I watched it. In fact, I wasn't going to at first. My wife said, you got to watch this, because I was nervous. I got to tell you, I am so used to getting stabbed in the back by people that claim to be conservatives, and then once they're elected in office, they do the opposite. But that's what I was frankly anticipating. What did Trump do in that press conference? They said, well, what about this fence you're going to build? He's not a fence, it's a wall. I'm backing up, go, wow, this guy's actually sticking his guns. Who are we going to pick for this, the Supreme Court? Antonin Scalia types that got Jim DeMint working on it as we speak. How about these trade deals where we have $600 billion trade deficits with China? We're going to renegotiate all that stuff. That's gone. In other words, he did exactly what he said he was going to do in the primary. Now, what does that have to do with the Republican Party? Well, I'll tell you what happened in Nevada. And I'll show you some numbers here in a minute on the screen. The Republican Party in the year 2004 was slightly ahead in registration to the Democrats. It was 41% Republican, as I recall, 40% Democrat in the registration. In 2006, Republicans slipped by about 3 points. In 2008, we tanked. We got down to 36%. Democrats were at 41%. In other words, national trends is what drives voter registration, even in the state of Nevada. Now, if Donald Trump does what he said he's going to do, and he sticks to his guns, and he picks conservatives for the Supreme Court, and he builds the wall and starts forcing businesses to use E-Verify and so forth, you're going to see a resurgence in the Republican Party. Because what happened in this last election cycle was, frankly, the rhino wing of the Republican Party, who was backing Jeb Bush and had all the money and everything, got their butts handed to it. You saw a new Republican Party, and a lot of it was based on the old Reagan era. How many remember the term Reagan Democrats? What were they? They were blue-collar, middle-class guys, mainly from the Midwest, who worked in what is now called the Rust Belt. They were worried about their jobs. Even though they were Democrats, they were conservative Democrats, and they voted their pocketbooks. Who would have thought in this election cycle Republicans would win Michigan, for example? Hasn't happened in ages. See, what happened was Trump went and appealed to the people that Reagan had appealed to. Now, what Trump needs to do to build our party is to continue on that conservative path. Now, another quick example before I go to the slide presentation here. How many of you are familiar with Governor Scott Walker? I assume most of you. I love Walker. He wrote a book, Unintimidated, right? Now, I've been in the legislature. I'm going into my 4th term. And when, miracle of miracles, Republicans took over the governorship, the Senate, the Assembly, it was very similar to what happened in Wisconsin. Wisconsin's a Democratic state. And Walker won in kind of a fluke election cycle, kind of like we just did in the last election cycle. So I'm thinking, okay, then what did Walker do, though? Walker actually did what he said he was going to do. He faced a recall. He had tens of thousands of mainly union guys showing up in the Capitol. The Democrats literally left the state in their state Senate. This guy you thought was crazy. Crazy like a fox, though. Why? Because here's what happened. After Walker did he did exactly what he promised he was going to do. He then faced a recall election and won. Then he ran for re-election, as did the Republicans in the Assembly and the Senate that had actually done exactly what they said. They were sweating bullets, I can guarantee it. But they did what they said they were going to do. What happened? Even in a democratic state, people respect leadership. They like people that honor their word. Scott Walker was re-elected. And in the Assembly and in the Senate, the Republicans kept the majority. The exact opposite would happen here in Nevada, just so you know. And by the way, I think I had about 50 copies of this book. My original one my wife got for me, and I highlighted certain key points in it. Then, when I bought all those copies, I had my kids. By the way, I have 8 kids. Jacob is my 3rd child. He has 2 twin boys, and his wife is expecting a little girl. So that will make our 14th grandchild. Knock on wood. Hope everything goes well. Anyway, I had my kids highlight the book. I gave a copy to every single Republican in the state Senate, every single Republican in the Assembly, and I gave it to Chief of Staff Mike Weldon for the governor. And this was 2 days before the governor's State of the State last time. And I said, Mike, look, man, if we're looking for a formula to keep the Republicans in power, this is it. This guy's got it all laid out. So anyway, my hope for the Republican Party is this. If Donald Trump continues to do exactly what he said he was going to do, I think you're going to see a resurgence in our party. You're going to see those numbers come up. You're going to see people join our party who in the past wouldn't even give it a second thought. And people are going to go, wow, that guy actually did what he said he was going to do. So I'm feeling good. Might be more of a populist type of party, but it's going to be a resurgence in the Republican Party. I'll show you some numbers here in a minute that frankly, are discouraging. Now, when I talked to Ray about 4 or 5 months ago about speaking here, education was a hot topic, okay? Now, another thing I do, I'm very proud of the fact that I do homework, okay? I read my bills, I study things, and I had done a PowerPoint presentation, and this actually originated, this was done actually with Victor Jakes, who now is a columnist for the Las Vegas Review-Journal. But Victor and I teamed up. He was really good with computers and PowerPoints, and we showed a lot of what you're going to see here to the Republican Assembly, my colleagues. And what the intention why we're doing that is to let them get educated on the issue. Let's go to our first slide. How many of you know how much we spend in Nevada on K-12 education in 1 year? That's correct. 35% of the state budget, okay? That is this one right here. This is the total pie, though. We spend $4.2 billion a year. Right now, it's up to $4.7 billion a year. In other words, we're almost spending $10 billion a year on K-12 education. How can that be? Well, if you look at these numbers, it's kind of hard for you guys to see, but the bulk of the money that we spend in education in Nevada doesn't come from the state legislature. She is correct. About 1/3 of the money that we do spend does come from the state, and that actually represents over half, in most years, of the total allocations that we have in the state. You'll notice, though, that the bulk of the money comes from local sources. Those are your property taxes and sales taxes and things like that. Very important, though, to understand where that money is coming from. And also, the amount that we spend on education is flat out phenomenal. In spite of that, where are we ranking-wise? And does anybody know? We're 50th in most categories, okay? For example, on ACT scores and things like that, we're the worst. What's the consistent answer to these problems? The consistent answer has always been more money. However, I went back and I researched, tonight, you know, the governor does the State of the State. I read every single State of the speech, going back to 1864, looking for educational issues. When did it become a problem in Nevada? Because what most people don't realize is clear through the 70s, Nevada was always doing very well nationally. And there was this big slide. First real hint I get to is 84, excuse me, Governor Richard Bryan. Now, we're talking accountability, right? 1984 is 33 years ago. What did he say? The first real warning signs came when Bryan was governor, okay? And he promised he's going to set up some commission, and we're going to make sure that we don't just waste all this money. Governor Miller, same thing. Now we jump to another decade, 1997. I propose an accountability program. Today, when a school is not performing, plans are drawn up, but all too often they never leave the drafting table. Go to the next slide. Governor Quinn again. Now we're another decade, right? The Governor's Commission on Excellence, anyway, he promises, remember, this is the massive tax increase, 2003, before this last session. That was the big one, under Republican control again, I might add. And he promises what? Checks and balances and all these things to make sure that that money isn't just wasted. Go to the next one. Brian Sandoval, same thing. I want to level the people of Nevada. Our educational system is broken. The only suggested answer has been more and more money. Okay, now jump to the next slide. What have we done? This is per pupil spending going back to 1983. This is roughly a 30-year window. What do you see? This is adjusted for inflation. How much have we spent per pupil in Nevada since 1983? We've almost doubled it. And by the way, that stops at 2011. If you go to 2015, it bumps up to where we're at the $10,000 per pupil mark. What have been the results? Go to the next slide. This is a similar one. This was put on by Cato Institute. This is the spending curve here, okay? This is the achievement curve. Is more money solving our educational problems? No. We're spending like drunken sailors, yet the actual results for testing is down here. There is no correlation between throwing money at educational issues and student achievement. Next slide. Also, there's all sorts of questions about, okay, what do we spend the money on? We're 9th in the nation for school administrators. We're 2nd for percentage of teachers. Go to the next slide. Compensation, that's another issue. Well, our teachers aren't paid enough. Well, actually, we're 18th highest in the nation. Teachers doing okay, okay? Doesn't mean, my sister's a teacher in Clark County, by the way, in Henderson, and I'd love to see her make $50,000 more a year. But you know what? At some point, you got to say, okay, where is the accountability? If you want to make more money in the private sector, I'm a plumber, as many of you know, and if I'm a good plumber, I make more money. If I'm a lousy plumber, I end up being a politician running for office, right? Okay, next one. Teacher-pupil ratios. We're at 21-to-1. We're a little higher than the Western average, not by much. Next. Okay, here's a big one. Class size reduction. The amount of money that we spend on class size reduction, $350 million a year. How successful has that been? Remember, that was the big push, remember? We got to reduce the number of the ratios of students to teachers and all that. Next slide. Class size reduction. This is from the LCB. They basically said, hey, guess what? We're spending $350 million a year, and we've seen no results, nothing positive in it. I'll explain why this is kind of important in a second. Go to the next one. Everybody agrees, right and left, the class size reduction is pretty much a waste of your money. Next. Okay, before we get to that, class size reduction, why is that a big one? Well, some of you remember we had Mr. Guthrie, who was our state superintendent. Guthrie actually and I talked a lot, because honestly, I'm not criticizing the public schools. What I am, though, is I don't mind even spending more money if it actually showed an improvement in the system. I don't want to spend more money when it just keeps getting worse and worse in spite of all the money. So Guthrie had an idea that I thought was fascinating. He said, look, let's do this. Give the top 10% of teachers in the state of Nevada $200,000. If you're the best teachers, 10%, and pay for that money with that class size reduction fund. And I'm thinking, okay. And he said, then you know what will happen? It'll attract the best teachers in the nation to Nevada. I just throw that out there as an example of the free market maybe come in to help with some of these issues. I know people go, well, how do you're a PE teacher, how do you figure out if you're the best, yada, yada. Sure, there's logistical things, but again, there's some ideas that are floating around out there that can help us, because really our goal here isn't to attack the public school system. Most of us, like me, I'm a graduate of the public schools, and I love the public schools. My kids, some of them have gone to public, some of them have gone to Minogue and so forth, but overall, I want to see them succeed. And so we got to come up with some answers. Okay, and so here's what we did last time. All right, this is the governor's, these are his proposals, including the total dollar amount. Now remember, this is the total amount of new spending. Remember, we're at $4.2 billion a year. We're now adding $700 million. So we're spending some serious dollars on education, and that puts us over. Now, those are some of the different categories. We won't get into those, I don't have enough time, but go to the next slide. Here's one of the more interesting ones. You'll notice full day kindergarten, okay? $226 million. What does that mean? Well, now when I was growing up, we went from like 9 to 11 or whatever and came home. Now they want to essentially have kids in kindergarten full time. dramatic increase in costs. Now, I don't even mind that if there's some evidence that it actually produces academic improvement. Next slide. Full-day kindergartens. Studies finding that the impact of full-day kindergarten fades by the end of 3rd grade. In other words, all that money doesn't do a darn thing by 3rd grade. It does do this. I'll tell you right up. It does allow the casinos that currently have to pay child care costs to pass that off onto the taxpayers. Because now you, the taxpayer, are picking up the cost, because now those kids that used to be in daycare that they had to pay for out of their pocket are now getting paid for by you, the taxpayer. All right, next slide. This is an interesting one, because how many of you heard of Khan Academies? K-A-H-N. Khan Academies is what this is kind of about. Look, the reality is this. Most of us grew up where we had a teacher and a chalkboard, and we sat at a desk, and we did it the other way. That's the same way we've been doing it in America since the 1800s. There are some fantastic advancements that are going on in the computer world. You know, I don't know about you, but I'm, like my son Jacob is a computer guru, according to me. Why? Because I'm comparing me to him, right? I can't do most of those things. But the reality is, if you go to your grandchildren, like I got a 3-year-old who grabbed my cell phone the other day, and within a minute was playing some game on it that I didn't even know I had in the phone. The younger generations are very computer oriented. That's what this does. Now, the advantage to that is, instead of one teacher trying to take care of 25 kids, every child has its own individual system. So anyway, that's another one of those innovations that exist out there that I think is coming. Why? Because as our generations fade away, those younger people will go, you know what? The Khan Academy program really works phenomenally well. And every kid has his own individual tailored system, graded, and one person running those programs can do several hundred students. Anyway, that's the future. But we gave $48 million, but we're not sure where it even went. Okay, next. Oh, I should have got that a different order. School counselors. We now have the highest number of school counselors, and it was really interesting talking to people about it. You know why we have this big increase in school counselors? Because school counselors have now replaced what we used to call parents. I'm not joking. You know, it sounds funny. The truth is, a huge percentage of the kids in our public schools today come from homes of single parent families. That is a reality. And when we laugh about that, my colleagues, when we were talking about that privately on the Democratic side, acknowledged that the reason they need an expansion in that is essentially these school counselors are mainly replacing absentee fathers. So again, this is a big cost, but really it's a social problem that the public schools are facing, and they're trying to come up with a solution. So anyway, so we bumped way up in the number of counselors, and in theory that's going to help, but it isn't, just so you know. Next slide. Read by 3. This is actually a really good one. What's funny is I went back and read Bob Miller's 1997 speech, and he said, we are going to have a program where all the children in Nevada public schools will not leave 3rd grade unless they can read it at that proficiency level. Then you read in 2005, Kenny Gwynn's speech, I promise that we will have a read by 3 program, and no kids are going to get out of 3rd grade unless they can be proficient in that. And then 2015, Brian Sandoval, I promise we're going to have a program of 3rd grade. Well, hopefully he'll do it. Hopefully he'll do it. I will tell you something funny about it in a second. This is one of the things we did in the last session that I totally agree with. The irony is, how many of you remember, I'm getting older, we used to call it flunking, right? If you couldn't pass a certain thing, you were held back, right? And as kids, we weren't politically correct. Johnny flunked 3rd grade. Why? He couldn't read. Well, then social promotion came in, and what happened? Next slide. Oh, Florida, by the way, I'm a little ahead of myself. Florida actually did do this read by 3 clear back in '99. You'll notice their numbers here shows that read by 3 stuff's pretty important. It works. Nevada, here we are. We're doing okay, but not as good as Florida, and that's the main difference. Next slide. Okay, now this is the interesting one. 3rd grade retention rate. That means being held back, flunking. 1 out of every 100 kids get held back. How many, though, of the other ones, the 99 that are moved forward, what's the percentage of those that can read at grade level? 4th grade, look. 27% of Nevada's fourth graders score proficient or better on the fourth grade reading exam. Those are the kids that went through third grade. That means 3 out of every 4 don't even reach the minimum proficiency to pass a pretty basic test. That's a huge problem, a huge problem. So how do you deal with it? Next slide. Oh, I'm sorry, not next slide. I'll go into this one right now, though, real quick. Read by third is super important. Here's the problem with that, though. We're not actually implementing it until 2019. Why? The theory is right now all the kids are going to be in kindergarten. We'll start with all these new programs so that by the time they're in third grade in 2019, they will have benefited from all these programs. What it really does, though, is it cheats all the kids that are in the program now. Why couldn't you just hold kids back? When we spent all this new money, I was going, wait a minute. Why can't we, look, if you can't read by third grade, at third grade level, why do we need more money? I mean, what are we paying people to do now with all these kids? How is it they're getting pushed on through? Well, we all know about it, social promotion, and we don't want to, wreck their self-esteem. So they promote these kids. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, you want to wreck somebody's self-esteem? They show up at my office and they can't even fill out a job application and they're 19 years old. I told a bunch of people, I said, what we really should do is this. Let's make a new requirement. Make about 10 different diplomas with a couple of serious paragraphs. And you got to get up on and here, have you ever participated in a graduation ceremony? You hand them their diploma and pat them on the back. Let's do something. You stand up and you got to read those 2 paragraphs in front of the entire class. If you can't read it, you don't get your diploma. Now that sounds cruel, but look, you give somebody a diploma, it's just like, I'm an Eagle Scout. What if they gave every Boy Scout an Eagle Scout pin? How much value would my Eagle Scout pin be? 0. Because essentially it loses all its value. If you can't read proficiently by the time you graduate from high school, you got a world of hurt coming. That really sets you back in a big way. So anyway, that's another issue. Here's another weird one. We did pass this too. Breakfast after the bell. So you show up at school and you didn't get fed breakfast. Now, I'm not talking before the bell, after the bell. Now, my sister teaches elementary. So now a kid shows up and he hasn't been fed. So as a teacher in the classroom, they have the kids eating food during class time, up to 40 minutes. I mean, look, I don't want to see kids go hungry and all that either. This is another example of where the schools are trying to fill in some gaps because of a lack of parental support in the home. I think it's a total waste of money and time. And what's really sad is it's going to harm the rest of the kids because the teacher now is going to be doing what? Teacher's now going to be focusing on helping Junior eat his breakfast. And then he's going to be laughing and spilling his milk. You can just picture in your mind what this does in a classroom. Not to mention the waste of time for the teacher and all the other students. Another one that's kind of silly, but whatever. All right, next slide. Total spending. Oh, am I out of time? Oh, Amaday's so late anyway. I mean, come on, man. By the way, I got your seat on the assembly floor. The one you used to sneak out on all the time? Up there in that corner? Hey, I'm proud of it. I get to sit in the same seat Mark Amaday had. All right, anyway, education program. This is the new spending right here, pretty much, okay? This is all the new stuff, with the exception of class size reduction. That's kind of the original. But you look at the amount of dollars we're spending. What's ironic is that only comes down to about 7% of an increase in the overall spending for public schools. If anybody really thinks that you're going to be able to improve Nevada's public education system from 50th in the nation to even say 40th by spending 7.5% more money, you're wrong. Problems is not, as I've showed in the beginning, it's not money. It really isn't. Not money at all. Okay, next, I got to speed it up. My wife's telling me to speed up. This is an interesting one. Cato Institute did a little exam. If you look at this, what's really interesting to me is trends, and this is national, right? Look what it costs. Total cost, full cost of K through 12 education of a single student graduating in a given year adjusted for inflation. If you graduated from Nevada schools or United States schools in 1970, and remember this is inflation adjusted, it cost less than $60,000. In 2010, it's $164,000. We're spending, this is national, this is a national trend. We're spending money like crazy, yet our results are getting worse and worse. If anything, looking at this from a mathematician point of view, the more we spend, the worse we're doing, not the better. All right, next. this is an interesting one, a little bit, a change in topic a little bit. I want you to look at some numbers. We're going to look at a couple different things here. You'll notice this is the pie of all of the general fund revenue for the state of Nevada. Okay, this is the year 1986. You'll notice a couple interesting things. Gaming pays what percent? Down here, actually, it's 45 cents out of every dollar is paid by gaming. Notice the next big one is sales tax, 37%. Go to the next slide. Now, we jump way ahead. This is the last one. This is before the commerce tax, by the way. We got a lot bigger pie, but you'll notice, where did gaming go? Gaming drops like a rock. Now, this is where it pays to have really, really good lobbyists and to give lots and lots of money to politicians running for office. Because what you'll see in Nevada, and I'll show you another thing, you notice gaming was paying 43 cents, pays 45 cents out of every dollar. Now they're down to 22 cents. And by the way, it's dropped down about another 4 cents. They're down below 20 cents out of every dollar. And now all you people out there are going to pick it up with the commerce tax. That's what some of that is. I only show you that because from a lobbying perspective, this is why those guys are so aggressive. Because here's the reality. If you own a casino in Vegas, let's say, you know, big hot shots, Sheldon Adelson, and you spend $5 million a year for lobbyists and for campaign donations and all that sort of stuff, and you get a return on that investment, what do you think he saves every year? If he was still paying 43% of the funds of the state of Nevada instead of 22, you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. I've often laughed about it, but the truth is the best investment in the world for return on dollars, buying politicians. Give big bucks to those guys running for office, and then when they get in office, you know, and how many of you heard of Macau, in China, right? Hong Kong in that area. We have invested billions of Nevada dollars that were generated in mainly Clark County in Macau. Do you know what their gross gaming tax is? 40%. 40%. We're at 6.25%. Now, by the way, I'm not suggesting we do some big tax thing. What I am suggesting, though, is when you look at these kind of numbers, and you're thinking, man, all the people in Nevada, why did gaming pay so much in the past? Because gaming, frankly, carries, we call it gaming. Nationally, it's gambling. And gambling, historically, has been a little bit of a vice. And why is it a vice? Because there are things connected to it. Alcohol, prostitution, get-rich-quick schemes, people get addicted to it. So most states have kind of suppressed it. They don't want it. We took it on and said, okay, we're the libertarian state, we're going to do whatever. In exchange for that, though, they would pay a disproportionate share of the tax burden of the state of Nevada, as they did up until the 1990s. And why is that unfair? People go, oh, that's not fair. No, it's totally fair. Because when you look at Nevada, we're always at the bottom of everything good, and we're at the top of everything bad. And why is that? Well, it's because our primary industry is a vice. Mild vice, true, but it's still a vice. And there are reasons, people think, well, people were Puritans. No, they weren't. They're actually pretty pragmatic. So if you guys want to have gambling in Nevada, fine and dandy. Pay some extra money because you guys bring a lot of social costs with you. And that's why in the past they did pick up a disproportionate share of the tax burden of the state, because those monies go to health and human services, educating the kids of their workers and so forth. All right, next slide. This again, now we jump to 93, 95. Again, that same pie. Notice as late as 95, we're still looking at 42%, 44% of gaming picking up the tab. Sales tax stays very consistent through the years. You guys are still paying more and more sales tax all the time that go to the state general fund. All right, I think that next slide. Okay, I already went over that. Now this one, I showed this to my colleagues in the assembly for one key point, because if you recall, we all voted down a margins tax. Then we changed the name to a commerce tax, and with Republican control of the entire process, we passed it, even though 79% of Nevadans said no. And I'll bet you Republicans, I'll bet you it's close to 100% said no. Now, as I'm in the fight here, I'm saying, oh, one of the arguments is, well, we need to diversify our tax base. So I had this slide. You want to see a pretty diversified tax base? See all those different cuts of the pie? Now, this is what it was 20 years earlier. Look how much bigger that pie is, and a lot more sections. So did we need to diversify it by creating yet another tax we call the commerce tax now? No, not for diversification purposes. So anyway, so all the colleagues that ended up voting for it, just, they're educated on it. And is that out of time? I'm out of time. Okay, I think Let's go to, I think is that my last slide? Oh no, one last one real quick. This is important. Remember I was talking earlier how registration trends in Nevada? This is it. This is where did the Republicans go south? You'll notice in 2004, that's just when George Bush starts his second term, we're actually leading the pack percentage-wise. 41% of the registered voters in Nevada are Republicans. Dems are at 40. What happens? 2006, the economy starts to tank. So do our numbers. Gets worse. 2010, we're all the way down now. In 2016, only 33% of registered voters in Nevada. You'll notice the other thing that's kind of interesting. Democrats stay very consistent, remarkably so. So where'd all those Republicans that left the Republican Party, where'd they go? Third party and nonpartisan. Right now, almost 30% of the registered voters in Nevada are nonpartisan. To attract those people back to our party, like I said in the beginning, pray for Donald Trump's success. Now, also, we had a lot of hot shots running for office, right? We got Adam Laxalt. I thought Mark was going to run possibly for governor. Heller's talking. All these guys are talking about running. Why are they backing out? I'll tell you one big reason, right there at the very bottom. Because when you get right down to it, most people vote their party ticket. So if you're going to run a statewide race in Nevada right now, you've got a 100,000 voter difference. That is huge, folks. And I did a ton of homework on this. If you were in even an assembly district where the margins are more than about 5%, you can pretty much kiss it goodbye. You're not going to win in that race. If you're upside down in those races, like mine, I'm great. I'm 22-point Republican district. No Democrat's going to run against me and have any idea of success normally. There may be some exceptions. But when you talk to all these guys that want to run for statewide office, the real savvy ones that are paying close attention to it, that numbers, we got to get back to here. Okay, we got to get back to where we're somewhat on the level playing field. When you have that much of a difference to overcome, that's going to be extremely difficult to do. So pray for Donald Trump. Pray that the Republicans are in the Senate. Quit knifing him in the back and start standing up for that guy and pray that he does what he said he's going to do. And I'll tell you, it's going to be just like Scott Walker. Scott Walker, everybody wrote him off. His poll numbers were way down. That guy ended up being such a great governor and doing such a great job as a Republican that not only did he get reelected in Wisconsin, but he was a major candidate for president of the United States. People are looking for leadership. So for the future of the Republican Party, pray for Donald Trump. And when our own elected officials, including Senator Heller, who to this day has not endorsed Donald Trump, pray when those guys start getting cold feet and going soft on us, get a hold of those guys. The Republican Men's Club and all the clubs in this state are so important. You guys have no idea how much influence you as individuals have if you simply send an email, get a hold of Ray, drag the speakers down here and say, hey, Amade, what are you doing? Hold their feet. Notice Sandoval hasn't been to one of these in a long time. Huh? That's why. Okay, well, thank you very much, folks.
Thank you. You did a good job. Didn't he do a good job? One thing about Ira, he's passionate. But you guys need to get off your duffs and go down. February 6th is the opening of the legislature. I'm an unpaid lobbyist down there. But you guys need to go down and help him. We're outnumbered right now. But it's all right. Ira went on. I knew he had an important topic to talk before Mark gets on. He gave Mark a chance to eat something. But before we do, there's a couple of late people. Lisa Krasner is our new assembly person. And with that, before we have Mark speak, he gave him a chance to eat anyway, you know. Hey, he wanted to do a little presentation. I like the board members, Gary, Andre, all of you, Roger, come up. He wants to do a little presentation. Gary?
Thank you for tuning in to this exciting episode of RMC TV. Gotta love Ira. Hey, got a big favor. We need to grow this channel and get the word out so we can get these conservative principles forward and take back the state. And the way you can start doing that is simply by subscribing. So you can subscribe to the homepage, or if you're on the video, just go down right here and hit subscribe. You're going to have an account to subscribe. So I'll have some instructions how to get that Google account and set it up at the end or in the show notes. Well, thank you for tuning in, and enjoy, and look forward to you next February for the RMC Luncheon. And, come back to the channel and find out what's going on. And course, make sure you check in on the website at republicanmensclub.org. Take care. Have a good day.